This will be the third video in this sequence of video journals documenting all of the things I've gone through and my attempt to try to overcome these things so I can bring more glory to God and to be ready to do His work. And this is the second video, official video, going into like a specific topic. First video was like an intro video. So recording this on the same day as the intro and also the family video, and I'll have to move on to working on sociology and Hume because I have exams coming up for those. But I wanted to get into the topic of my kind of speech impediment and kind of the whole dynamic with that, and kind of how I've been working through that and what it was like growing up with that. I think this could be a video that could last for probably multiple hours, but I guess I'm gonna try to keep it under maybe 20 minutes, but we'll see how it goes. So, growing up, I don't know if I had trouble necessarily learning how to talk. It wasn't like some sort of delayed onset. I don't think I was an early talker. I was definitely like an early like walker, and I was running very early, so I had those gross motor skills developing. But like as far as speech, it didn't develop super early, but wasn't necessarily I think super delayed, if that makes sense. And I started talking. I think it was a lot of like gibberish, like probably like most people at that age. But then I had a lot of trouble articulating certain vowel sounds, and probably even consonant sounds too. I think the k sound was very difficult for me to articulate. I was often confusing it with a t sound, like from a T. So C's were T's. It wasn't dyslexia. It was just when I wrote out T, I just said that sound, the K sound, the hard C sound. So I dealt with that for many years, all the way through high school, actually. It wasn't until the summer after my senior year of high school ended that I decided to, and this was a choice, I want people to highlight that too. It was a choice. It was my motivation to get speech therapy and to kind of get things corrected. We'll get into that more later. I just wanted to set it up as an issue that I've dealt with from when I started speaking all the way through high school, and something that I still deal with here at Pepperdine sometimes. So again, I had just issues with those certain sounds, and I think there was maybe like a lisp or something associated with it too. And it was one of the hardest things to deal with, because whenever I would go out, I either got made fun of because of that, or it was implied. So I remember I know there were many times where people made fun of me for it. I remember being at like a homeschool group in Naperville, Illinois. It was at a park, and like I went up to two people that were homeschoolers and just attempted to talk to them, and I don't entirely remember what they said because I legit was very young, but they just started kind of picking my words apart and what I was saying, and I was never a kid to, I wasn't the type of kid to go and make conflict or to upset people or to fight people. So whenever stuff like that happened, I would always internalize it and not ever stick up for myself and say, that's not right what you're doing, or stop it. I just kind of took it. Kind of, probably that was due to my Christian belief, which I think was partially distorted in what Jesus would have wanted in that situation. But again, I was also trying to serve him. We'll get into that later, kind of when we get into religion stuff in a future video. But there's many instances like that were just, I remember being on a farm in, I think, northern Illinois, and with one of my best friends. I'm not going to mention which one, just out of maybe confidentiality and respect for that person. But I remember talking, and then I don't remember if I was asking him if he thought I sounded okay or if it just got brought up, but he just kind of said, "Oh, don't you have? Oh, I thought you had like a speech disorder or something." Like, it was very obvious, like that you had something. Like that's basically what he said. And I remember again taking it, internalizing it, not fighting it, but going home after that trip and just being so upset. Maybe at him being a little upset that he was my best friend and he said that to me, but also being upset that I was dealing with it, that I had to go through it, that I was being made fun of for something that wasn't even really in my control, that was genetic or environmental. That was very upsetting for me. Very, very upsetting. I remember just being in my room, after, and that's something I tended to do a lot growing up, was just isolate myself whenever I was going through stuff. And definitely I've done that a lot here at Pepperdine, kind of why I'm in the lab here. Partially also because there's not many places on campus where you could really, really talk in a private place. But there's many instances like that, that were just hard. And I remember when I was a CNA at McNeil Hospital in high school, I still fully hadn't corrected that sounds. So whenever I was supposed to say k sound, it came out as a t sound, as I said earlier in this video. So I remember talking to one of the student nurses there, and I'm just gonna say that there's a lot of material as far as her personality and the way she carried herself that we could talk about and would have benefited from a relationship with Christ and maybe some Bible reading. I'll just leave it at that. But I remember talking to her, and she was conveying the message to me, and then I was responding, and I wanted to say okay, like the way we usually say it, with the O-K-A, but I wasn't articulating it with the C. It was the T sound, so it sounded more like O-Tay, and that's how I was walking around talking from when I was probably 3 or 2, or whenever I started talking, through sophomore, junior, senior year of high school. And I remember going to a patient's room after that, and being so sad, being so upset that that's how I was talking, and how I wasn't getting, or whenever I would get feedback, it was like a personal attack, because she kind of made fun of me for it. She was like, "Oh, I love how you say it like that," like just like a really like belittling kind of comments that I was not capable of articulating words or communicating well, and that it was like a character judgment, that it was something that like I was choosing to do, and or something like that maybe. So I remember walking into the patient's room, and I think the patient was comatose, so I would often while working at the hospital really like zone out, and think about life a lot when I was working with those like unconscious patients. Not that I wouldn't talk to them or that I wasn't like really being gentle with them like I was, but like as you're like scrubbing them, it's almost like therapeutic for yourself too. It's a time of reflection. And I remember just thinking, I was like, wow, like what does it mean for me as a person, and mean, what does it mean, I guess, that so many people around me have just ignored that, like how I spoke, and didn't care enough to say, Luke, you're not saying that right. I think by then, especially in high school, it was less prevalent, as far as the frequency of words that were being distorted, but it was still there, and I hated it. And there's many other experiences I could talk about too. I think another one that I'll talk about before I get into kind of like the ramifications of the speech impediment, is going along with the k sounds. I was for a very long time incapable of pronouncing my own name. I don't know how many times I had to practice it, and when I say my own name, I'm referencing my first name, not my last name, which my last name is terribly hard to pronounce, but my first name, Luke, it was very hard for me to pronounce. Not that it's a particularly hard name, but I just wasn't, I think, taught or used to saying those syllables, or those, not syllables, but those sounds, those consonant sounds. So instead of saying Luke with the sound, it was with the t sound, so it was like loot. Like, I'm gonna go get some loot and put it on my pirate ship or something. Or I'm gonna play my lute from the 1600s or something, I can't tell you how many times I was made fun of for that too, or how many times I had to repeat my name over and over and over and over again to people, and how awkward it was, how ashamed I felt, how embarrassing it was. And those experiences really affected me emotionally. I think it really hasn't been until this spring, so January through April of 2024, that I realized how low my confidence was in myself. I think it was especially due to all these things regarding speech growing up, and those things of speech really impacted me, not only with my confidence, but also with my socialization and just willingness to go out and do things. So my solution to not being able to pronounce words and speak well was just to stop talking and to stop avoiding all situations where I could possibly make a mistake. And it's really simple psychology, right? Like we avoid things that hurt because that's just not how our brains work. And when I would talk, I would get hurt emotionally. And I was bullied, and it was upsetting, and it would take days to recover. And that was my solution, was just don't talk, because then people just look at you and be like, oh, Luke is kind of shy or quiet. But then it was easier to deal with those comments of being shy, quiet, timid, even though those stung. Those were easier to deal with than the comments that, oh, why can't you say this right? So, going from there, I isolated myself. In my room, I was okay around my family, but then they also knew that I didn't know how to pronounce things right. And I remember my dad saying that too one day. But there's something like less intimidating about speaking around them. It was like their family, so I don't really have to like stress about it. But that was my solution. I just didn't like going out and doing things. Extracurricular wise, I was so scared that I wouldn't be able to introduce myself, like, and say my name, that I was just like, okay, I won't do new things, I'll just kind of stay in the books, or play video games, something I did a lot in middle school. Because guess what? It doesn't involve socializing. And that was my kind of way to deal with stuff, was just not to go out and talk or to meet people, which has huge ramifications on academic and life success. We'll get into those later. But yeah, it was from the simple things like talking on the phone or ordering food. Those were traumatizing. Those were so scared. I would feel my heart racing when I was at the table, like at a restaurant, before the waitress came, because I was so scared to talk in front of people. And literally from whenever I started talking to now, I feel like even in this video that I'm making, I have to be so intentional about what I say. Otherwise, I start tripping over words. It's almost like my muscles haven't developed fully, I feel like. And it's so hard to just talk fast and for it not to come out as like just like a word salad. And I think there could be some sort of physical abnormality or neurological issue. I wouldn't be surprised if there were either, or maybe both of those things. But I think a lot of it was just going years and years without practice, just in talking like throughout the day, really affected that. So I think it's very much environmental and circumstantial as far as my possible limitation with speaking, even to this day. I kind of throughout the whole experience though, and even to this day, I do wonder why God allowed it to happen. Why? So I think I do take a fatalist perspective on life. Not that I don't believe that we have free will or choice, or that we can't achieve stuff through our own efforts, but I think that if something happens in our lives, if we have control over it to a certain extent, but there's also some things that happen in our lives that I think God wants us to go through for growth. And but I wonder why he chose this for me, because it's been so painful and so hard, literally in every conversation I've had in the and in so many years, it's been me just being so afraid that other person is judging me and having to like spend so much energy like hyper focused on talking and articulating like how I am right now, like making sure every word comes out well. And I always lacked fear as far as talking to people who were in high positions. Like there wasn't some sort of innate fear that I feel like a lot of people have. They're like, oh, like this person has a higher position than I do or something like that. I didn't have that fear. My fear always came from, will I be able to talk to this person and not sound like an idiot? Or how will I be able to talk to this person and just not have my words fall apart? That was always the issue that prevented me from talking to people that had seniority or who were important, or just even like random people too. Like that was always the reason. And even here at Pepperdine, I thought that after speech therapy, the senior year, summer after my senior year, that it was all going to be fine, and maybe I would have like a fresh start, right, in speaking. And then there was multiple people here at Pepperdine that were like, oh, Luke, like, do you have a stutter, you know? And it, I think, came from my want and desire to articulate words well. So whenever I would start to say a word, if I didn't say it right, I would go back and restart it. So it sounded like a stutter, but it was more like overcompensation, and a desire to get just the words to sound right. Overcompensation could be a video or could be a video in and of itself. I think it has affected so many parts of my life in a negative sense, and probably even possibly first semester guitar grades too. But the overcompensation was always something that was due to a desire to do things right and to improve, even if it didn't show that. That's an idea that would need unpacking and probably could use 30 minutes just for that. But yeah, multiple people here were like, you know, Luke, do you have a stutter, you know, or something? And even professors too, you know, I thought I came in, you know, being able to talk well, and many of them just thought I was kind of like a boy, probably kind of awkward and really, really shy freshman year, which I think, you know, having worked with freshmen, a lot of my freshmen that I mentored last year were, I would say, kind of fit that category, but maybe not to the extent that I was in. And I don't think it was really until I think March, maybe February, I can't remember, when I gave an oral presentation of an essay I wrote about Soren Kierkegaard's Fear and Trembling, which goes into the Abraham Isaac story. And it was a part of my Grit Books 4 course. I guess I shouldn't say it was a part of, because it was something I did outside the course, but it was an essay I wrote for that course. And my mentor, Dr. John Kern, who taught that, allowed me to present that in this conference that was not only for Pepperdine students, but also for other ones in the Southern California area. And I remember having to like read that out loud, you know, in a presentation. It was like 5 pages, so it was, you know, it was not terribly long, but it definitely had substance to it. And I remember just, I messed up sometimes, right, like here and there, but it wasn't bad. But it was really, really good. And I remember just having this kind of liberation, you know, that like I was like, wow, I could actually speak and it doesn't sound like trash, you know. And I remember going to his office later that day. It was a Saturday night, but he was still grading, and I had emailed him about meeting because I was going through a lot of spiritual stuff too. Still am, and I will still be meeting with him because he's been with my I think that the closest professor I have on campus is Dr. Kern. I've had other faculty members for research, but there's something about him, I think, our shared kind of struggles that we just connect with on a level that's far beyond that of my other mentors. And I remember going to him on that night, and after the conference, and I was just kind of opening up to him about, I told him about speech stuff before and just how hard it was just learning to speak, and even in speaking in the Grid Books classroom throughout the sequence of those 4 classes was just, it was petrifying. And I don't know if I asked him if he thought I spoke. Okay, the weird message popped up. Anyways, I'm not sure if I asked him if I thought I spoke well or didn't speak well, but somehow it got brought up or something. And I remember him saying, Luke, you speak really well. And that really changed like a lot for me. Like that did so much for me as a speaker, and it really brought my confidence back. So I really appreciated what he said. And I think now too, and somewhere where I believe I really thrive at is in the clinical setting as far as communication goes. And I remember working at Kaiser and in the ICU, I was talking to one of the clerks there, and he was definitely really experienced in that setting and working with other volunteers. And she said, Luke, you're very comfortable, like just how you talk and how you act and how you do your work here, and I remember I was even talking to one of the clerks today because I was at Kaiser today, and she was telling me, like, because we kind of were talking about like early childhood development and kind of her experience being introverted and being really shy, and she just said to me in the past too, like, you're really, like, as I was telling her that I want to be a psychiatrist, and she was like, psychiatrists are kind of quirky, and which I could probably I kind of disagree with that, but anyways, kind of quirky people. And she was like, you seem like a very normal person, and just like how you talk and like how you're outgoing and stuff like that. So that was a few weeks ago she said that, and that was before we even talked about me being introverted or anything, or having any of these issues with speaking or anything. And I remember like today, like I recall today that we were talking, and she was like, yeah, like I told her everything I went through, right? Maybe not everything, not all 28 minutes like this video is contains, but I remember telling her about all of, or at least some of the stuff, and she was like, yeah, I couldn't see that in you. Like I don't see that, those issues in you. I don't see any of that. You're outgoing, and you're like great at talking, and I still need more practice. And even this video, I've noticed I've tripped up a few times, and I think it comes with just trying to get more practice that maybe should have been done many years ago, but just never happened. So that's where I'm at right now, is more practice and putting myself in situations like reading the essay for that conference that really built my confidence in having to speak in front of people. Those things seem to help a lot. But I also think now it's the mental battle. It's trying to get rid of those memories. Maybe not even try to get rid of those memories, but to realize that was a part of my life for a while, and it affected me, and it wasn't right, and all of that. But God has used that in so many ways. I have used this in so many ways for testimonies for people. Pretty much telling people that, if I could do something, given what I've gone through with the speech disorder and stuff like that, you can do it too. And I know to encourage people a lot. And I think most of all, it's made me really conscious of what I say and how I treat people. I think there's many people that I've met that speaking has never been an issue for them. So they just kind of say whatever is on the tip of their tongue. And that means even things that may hurt people. So for me, even in this moment, I'm thinking about what I'm going to say. I have pauses. It's very intellectual, and I don't want to hurt people the way that I've been hurt. And all of that has been a desire to think about every word I'm about to say. And not only the words, but the effects and impacts of those words, and not just the, I'd say the impacts and the feelings of the people after I deliver those words. So I believe that so much of this 20 years of dealing with it, or maybe 16, 17, 18 years of dealing with this, right? It's been terrible, absolutely terrible. And to my development and to my ability to just do things. But I think that has been very beautiful too. I think like the doctors have said to me at Kaiser, that I just give off, I'm a nice person, I give off good energy, and I listen. I don't know if I would still have those, if they would still be complimenting me on those things, if I hadn't gone through what I did, and how that struggle made me know how to talk to people, how to be careful with what I say. I think that struggle really taught me how to be careful with what I say, and how to listen to people, and how to just I think I have learned what it feels like to be hurt by words, and I apply that to how I speak now. But I think, like I said earlier, it's about getting through the mental battle. Those memories are still there, and they still hurt a lot of times. And sometimes they pop back in there, like, oh man, I just messed up the conversation. I suck at talking, speech impediment. It just starts going over and over in my head. And I trying to work on that. I think talking more, and talking in formal settings, like in presentations or at conferences, or maybe, hopefully, maybe in front of and for government officials, maybe, if my opioid kind of research and actions kind of turn out to that. But I think those really help build confidence, and will help me kind of win the mental battle that's being fought in my brain right now. So I said this video was gonna be 20 minutes, and it's turning out to probably be 35 minutes, but I think this is one of the most fundamental things that has made me who I am, is having to go through speech impediment and having to fight through that. And I am, again, in so many ways, upset that I had to go through it, but so thankful at the same time, and so happy that I had to struggle through that, because it's really made me who I am as a person. So